This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a highly popular and beloved actor who will forever be immortalized as the naive, optimistic, and lovable Balki Bartokomous on the hit TV sitcom Perfect Strangers, for which he received an Emmy Award nomination for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series and a People's Choice Award nomination for Favorite Actor in a New TV Series. But beyond that iconic role, he's brought us dozens of iconic performances in movies, on TV, and on the stage. On the big screen, you've seen him in many great movies, including Risky Business, Beverly Hills Cop 1, 3, and Axel F, The Flamingo Kid, Courage Under Fire, The First Wives Club, Diamond Zero, Mr. Art Critic, From a Place of Darkness, Virgin Alexander, The Strike, Clowning, and many more. On television, besides his iconic role in Perfect Strangers, he was Dennis Kemper in Sarah, he was Jean-Luc in Step by Step, he was Patrick Dalton in The Young and the Restless, and he was Principal George Hawthorne in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. And for 2 years, he starred in his own reality show, The Bronson Pinchot Project. And he's guest starred on dozens of iconic TV shows like Third Rock from the Sun, Clueless, Law and Order, Hawaii Five-0, NCIS, Ray Donovan, to name just a few. He's also appeared in numerous TV movies and miniseries, including The Incredible Time Travels of Henry Osgood, Jury Duty the Comedy, The Langoliers, Merry Christmas, George Bailey, and The Residents. On the stage, our guest appeared on Broadway in Zoya's Apartment, Putting It Together, and Sly Fox, and he also starred in the national tour of Stones in His Pockets. And if all of that weren't enough, our guest is an extremely successful voice actor. He's won numerous awards for his portrayal of Bash in the highly acclaimed podcast series A Voice in Violet, and he's narrated well over 400 audiobooks and received multiple awards, including the prestigious Narrator of the Year Award in 2010 from audible.com. And that same year, Audiophile magazine named him the best voice in fiction and classics. I'm delighted to welcome Bronson Pinchot to our show. Bronson, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now, Bronson, you didn't have the easiest childhood, and I read that you were badly bullied as a kid, which is something we both have in common, believe me. Do you think that in some way being bullied has impacted your sensibilities as an actor?
Of course. I mean, you have two choices. You really have basically 2.5 choices when you are habitually bullied. One is to figure out another way to, make it through through society. So you could either be the victim and be bruised all the time and grow up to be a serial murderer, which is what most of those kids are. Those kids that go shooting up schools are kids that nobody was nice to. Or you can find an alternate, take on things, which has worked for me because it just works. I mean, I find life absurd. So it's easy for me to be a comedian because I think the whole thing is wonderfully silly.
When you first got to Yale University on a full scholarship, I might add, you wanted to study fine arts and be a painter. What made you switch your focus to acting?
Well, I got in a play and that was the end of that. I mean, I was there, I was in front of a lot of people and I was making choices in real time, which is what acting is. And they were eating it up. And I thought, well, this is where I obviously belong. I love drawing and painting and designing, but it didn't really hold a candle anymore, not to that.
We were really lucky that you switched. Now, your very first movie was Risky Business, and I know that none of the actors, except maybe Tom Cruise, thought the movie was going to be a success. Have you gotten better over the years at predicting whether a project you're involved in will be a big hit?
I never have been any good at knowing whether a thing would be a hit because that doesn't follow any rules. I know when it's going to be fine quality. But for instance, True Romance is of extremely high quality and it wasn't a hit. It's a cult favorite, but it wasn't a hit. So I I knew when we were making it that it was superb, but there's no way to know, because I mean, look at the stuff in any given year that's a hit and the stuff that's brilliant and doesn't get. So no, I just didn't know what it would be. It was such a stylish movie. When I finally saw it, I was amazed at how stylish and elegant it was, because you can't tell that when you're shooting. No, I mean, what you always know is this penetrating the dartboard and making a mark that's indelible. And that, you can tell from the values around you, the way it looks, the way other people are committing to their performances, the way everybody's lovingly. Sometimes it's just not gonna click, and sometimes it is. That you can tell.
I mentioned Tom Cruise. Is it true that he told you not to do a TV show?
I think he probably, yes, but in those days, it was much commoner. I call it genre snobbery. It was much commoner to say, "Oh, well, if you do a TV show, no one will ever want you in a movie again." That was more common in 1982. Now people just do, they do their work, and it doesn't have that same stigma. But I'm glad it did a TV show. I had a great time.
Oh, that's for sure. And we all had a great time watching you. You suddenly became a hugely popular international star in 1984 after Beverly Hills Cop came out. How well do you think, Bronson, that you adjusted to being famous?
Not well at all. I tried to make it real, and that didn't work. So when people came up to me, I decided I was going to be the person that solved why that interaction that between the audience and the actor and real person, why that's so weird. And I decided I was going to make it work finally. So when people come up and say, "Can I have an autograph?" I'd say, "No, because that's impersonal. Why don't we just have a conversation?" And they would look at me like, "No, I don't want a conversation. I want you to sign this. That's what actors are supposed to do." And I was trying to, or I would say, "Why don't you sign something for me?" And they just couldn't process that. So I tried to make it something I could have some ownership in, but that's not what they want. They basically want to, security guards that go around a building at night and they have to stick their card in each machine to show where they are. That's what people want when they see you on the street. They want to stick their card in and have you validate that they met you, and then they want to move on. They don't want to really talk. It's the strangest thing. But I don't think there's any healthy processing of fame. There's nothing healthy about it.
It's very interesting to me that you actually wanted to invest that kind of energy in a total stranger. It would have been easier for you to just sign and let them be on their way. But the fact that you wanted to connect says a lot about you.
Well, I tried. It's easier now, you see. Now it's easy because at the time it was like everything was white hot and everybody had to have their moment. But now people will say to me, when I was a little kid, my parents divorced and I kind of stopped talking or smiling, but then I would like watch the show once a week and I would come out of my shell. Now that is the conversation I was wanting to have. That is exactly what I was asking people in 1986 to do, to tell me about their lives and not make me sign something. But it finally happened. It just took 4 decades, because when it's white hot, they can't have a conversation. They just want to touch you or get a thing, and that's okay. It's okay.
Well, what they wanted to do was prove to everybody that they met you.
And that's cool, but you realize very quickly, if you're empathic, you realize that they're really just coming in, it's in a subtle way. It's kind of like what they did to the Beatles, where they would tear strips of their clothing off. They want a little piece, and that's a strange thing for both sides. But it just is what it is.
Well, you survived it. Of course, with Perfect Strangers, I have to say you have an uncanny ability to do accents. We first saw that in your performance as Serge in Beverly Hills Cop. Now, I know your ancestry is Italian and Russian, but you were born in New York. You were raised in Pasadena. Where did your facility with accents come from?
Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea where anything comes from. I really don't. I see, I see young people sometimes doing these incredible moves on skateboards and all. I'm like, where does that come from? You can't really, they can see it and copy it, but you can't really say, where does that come from? So I have no idea where it comes from. None whatsoever, but it's right there.
Boy, was it ever. Were you initially reluctant to play Balky on Perfect Strangers?
Yes, I was, because the description of him seemed unattainable to me. They said he's innocent and ebullient and effervescent and pure, and I thought, how do you play pure? How would I play that? How could I convince people? Because I think I'm 25-year-old me was thinking, I think I'm kind of sophisticated and urbane. Could I pull that off? Can you act that? So I was hesitant, but I said to myself, all right, you go pick a place, go pick some like off the beaten track hotel. And I picked a place near Santa Barbara with these bungalows. And I checked in and I said, you can come out when you've got the character. You have to have that character. And so I locked myself in this little bungalow for 2, 3 days. And on the third day, I woke up and I saw my shoes that were sitting on the floor. I had gotten them in Europe, and they were made of woven kind of, like sandals, but they were, for some reason, they were dyed blue. I don't know why I bought them, but I looked down at them on the floor and I heard Balky's voice for the first time inside my head say, oh, look. And so I said, okay, I got him. They're my blue shoes, but he's seeing them for the first time. So then he was there. Didn't take very long.
That's quite amazing, actually. And who invented the dance of joy?
Well, Mark and I did. And it said in the script they do the dance of joy. And so Mark and I looked at each other and said, okay, so we do like one of these and then we just match it over there. But it took us under a minute. And that's the way it was.
It's like a cross between the do-si-do and the hokey pokey.
Yeah, it's fun. We loved it. The very last time, no, I guess I did it with him recently, but on the taping of the last show, somebody in the audience said, would you do the dance of joy one last time? And it had never really occurred to me that there would be a last time. So I turned to Mark and said, now we are so, and I was trying to say happy, but all that came out was a gigantic sob. And I just like bent double and was sobbing uncontrollably. And poor Mark, because there was this huge audience, and he didn't want to leave them with that image of me sobbing, bent double. So he yanked me up and said, you've got to do this. And then we did it.
Were you surprised that you had that reaction when you found out it was the last time?
Yeah, of course I was. It just came shooting out of me. I could not have stopped it any more than you could stop a tsunami. But up until that point, I was very kind of pulled together and slightly grouchy and just protecting myself. But then something about the idea that, celebrate joy for the last time hit me in a funny way. And but it's the way it was. We survived.
What I really loved about Perfect Strangers, besides the really good casting and the great writing, is that it was a real situational comedy. It was about the characters and the situations they got into, not about issues, which so many other sitcoms focused on. You know what I mean?
Yes, that was a choice. They wanted to make it really about the theme of the show is kind of like not really understanding, not having to understand what brings people together. The characters never really completely get it. Mark and I didn't get it in real life. We used to bicker a lot until one day we would bicker about how to do stuff and how to make it funny and how to this and that. And one day it just dawned on us that we were playing best friends who totally gave each other the benefit of the doubt. But meanwhile, we hadn't caught up yet as people, because those characters were perfectly in sync and we would sometimes be out of sync. So then we stopped doing that. And we've been in sync ever since. And that's not coming up on 40 years.
Did you have any input into the storylines for the show?
Never into the storylines. That just wasn't something that they were interested in doing. But, I would take whatever I was given on the script and fill it full of, like when you baste a turkey or stuff a chicken. I mean, they would give you the bird, and then we could do the stuffing and the basting and the vegetables and the juices and the presentation, and that was fine. That was plenty.
When I was doing my research for this interview, I found a 1986 magazine interview with Lucille Ball. And when she was asked if there were any current sitcoms that she liked, she said she loved your show. Now, you can't get any higher praise than that, can you?
No, you can't. When news reached me that she had said that, and then she invited us to the setup of Life with Lucy, and we met her, and she said wonderful things, and really from the heart. It was incredible. It was incredible because whether she knew it or not, she had to have done the math. Obviously, Mark and I were both born in the 50s. So obviously, if you do the math, we obviously grew up watching her. So she had to have seen those, she had to have seen her own influence. She had to have. But she never said so. She never said, oh, great, carrying on the tradition. She just said, you know what you're doing. And it was wonderful.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you had that chance to have such a legend praise you like that. Well, Perfect Strangers got moved a few times from Wednesday night to Friday night to Saturday night and then back to Friday night. And those changes affected the ratings. Why did the network keep doing that?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea why anybody does anything.
Well, there were only 6 episodes in the final season, season 8, when the show was getting such good ratings. I thought that was odd too.
Yeah, I mean, by that time, I think it hit. Those last 6, I didn't even. We shot the last 6 in order to get to an even number of 150. I don't think we thought they were ever even going to air. I've never seen any of them, but.
Well, they were really good. I'm sure you're aware that Perfect Strangers is one of the few American sitcoms that's been hugely popular all around the world. It's been copied and remade in many other countries. That must be so gratifying.
I guess. I don't really think about it. The thing is, people always think that the show, they try to remake it from time to time. There have been at least 2 remakes that I can think of in the last couple of years that never saw the light of day. And what I never say to people, but what's the truth is that the one-time chemistry of Mark and myself is what made the show, not the setup. If people think they're going to have a Perfect Strangers with, one guy that's from a different culture and one guy, that's not what made it. What made it was our, just like mercurial, weird, inexplicable energy. You could find 100 shows where there's an Italian and an American, or no, that's not what it was. That's why they never take off, because I think, well, you think you're going to cast that? That's once in a lifetime. But I never say anything. I always just wish them luck. But they're getting it wrong. Like they're getting what the thing that they think that they can recreate is something you can't. Somebody could find it, but they just get it wrong. But people get a lot of stuff wrong in showbiz. I mean, some of these remakes, I don't know what they're about. I don't know why.
I don't either. And that whole fish out of water concept from Perfect Strangers, I'm sure that was the inspiration for Sacha Baron Cohen to create the character of Borat. But Balki was a lot smarter than Borat, don't you think?
I don't know. I've only ever seen clips of Borat. The thing that Balki has that is, as far as I know, unique is that he has a very palpable, actual beating heart and clearly present, actual full, soul. What I think you see a lot of times with lovely, great classic TV characters that they present one thing, but it's all presentation. Like, could you really dig in there and find the actual DNA and the marrow? That's the one thing that it's got to be more. It's got to be more than a presentation of, I can't give examples because I don't want to get on anyone's bad side, but there were lots of characters in the 80s that were like, here's how I sound. And it's like, yeah, I get it. But that's like those sumo oranges that you can get that are in season right now. And then when they're gone, like, forget about them. Anyway.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You mentioned True Romance, which was the first time I remember hearing you speak in your natural voice, doing a good character role in a dramatic film. Would you consider that movie a turning point in your career?
It certainly should have been. I don't know that it was. That was the first time I did the kind of work for which I had been trained, which was naturalistic, moment to moment, reality-based acting. The movie ought to have been a big hit. And if it had been a big hit, I imagine I would have done a number of film roles after that. But for some reason, it just got lost in the shuffle. And the fact that it's a cult classic now is great. But if it had been a big commercial success when it came out, I had other experiences instead that were just wonderful.
Well, it's a great movie. True Romance is a really great movie. I read somewhere that when you did Beverly Hills Cop 3 and you filmed your big scene with Eddie Murphy, he wasn't even there. Is that true?
Eddie wasn't feeling hot. So we did our two shots, or I've never seen the movie because I never watched myself. But when it came to doing the single, single of me, single of you, the director said to me, I'd rather just send him, let him go up to his room and take a nap and chill, and then you could do the scene with me. I said I'd be thrilled. I knew how to do the character. So yeah, he didn't feel so hot.
It's amazing when you watch the movie, you'd never know it. And I have to mention, Bronson, in 1996, you co-starred in a wonderful, very important movie about AIDS called It's My Party, directed by Randall Kleiser, who appeared on our show. Actually, we've had your fellow castmates, Bruce Davison, Christopher Atkins, they were on the show too. It's one of my favorite movies. What was your experience making that movie?
Oh, it was a wonderful experience because some of it was shot. So it was it was his story. It was his story of an ex of his that had AIDS in the early days, and there was no treatment whatsoever. So he hoarded up these sleeping pills and had a party and killed himself while surrounded with all his friends. So it was Randall's story. Randall was obviously the surviving lover. His ex-lover had done this, and he'd written. And so a lot of it was shot in the same locations where it happened. And there was a lot of emotion on the set. And also there was a living wall of people that had died of AIDS while we were shooting. So during the thing, there's a hallway with Polaroids of people that have died, and it doesn't follow continuity. Whoever, could be 100 people one day and in one scene and 30 the next because it was shot out of order. But it was a great experience, a great experience. And I had an interesting experience while making it. Roddy McDowall was in it, and Roddy McDowall did a movie when he was 12 or something. I think it's called How Green Was My Valley, but he plays a little boy whose father dies in his arms in a Welsh mine. And I watched that when I was just a little older than his character. I must have watched it when I was 13 or 14, and it moved me so much that I was sobbing like my heart would break. It just touched me so much. So years later, I was in a Hollywood restaurant, and Roddy McDowall walked in, and I was joking with the waiter because I was saying, "You're taking too long." So I grabbed the tray from him, and Roddy McDowall walked in, and my hands went numb just from the memory of his brilliance, and the whole platter crashed all over the ground. I didn't say anything to him. And then years still later, when we made the movie, I had a scene with him, and I said, "You moved me so much when I was little, and then you walked into this restaurant and I dropped the thing, and here we finally are." So, but that's how showbiz is.
Well, you've worked with some amazing legends. You did 2 TV shows with George Burns. Did you get to know him at all?
No, it was his comedy anthology. but I never met him. I think he just did the openings and closings. He wasn't there.
Oh, that's too bad. What about Tippi Hedren? You did Diamond Zero with her. Was she great?
She was beyond great. She was warm. She was grand. She was funny. She was beautiful. I just loved her. She was one of the greats.
Oh, yeah. And of course, you played Bette Midler's boss, the flamboyant interior designer in the First Wives Club. What was it like working with the divine Miss M?
It was fun. It was fun. She's a little handful. She's, a bundle of energy. And all the ladies on that were astonishing. And every last one of them, they're all quite something.
Your show, The Bronson Pinchot Project. We got to see your amazing skills as a contractor, designer, renovator. You turned old homes into beautiful mansions. Where did you learn how to do all that?
Oh, I taught myself. Somebody said to me once, I was trying to hire an architect and she was listening to my ideas. And she said to me, which is a very generous thing to say, considering, she said, you don't need an architect. You are the architect. You think like an architect. All you need is a crew. You can explain your ideas to them. Can you draw? I said, yes. She said, just explain your ideas directly to the crew. You don't need me. You are an architect. And so I was like, oh, I'm an architect. And so, I would draw my ideas. And as I went along, I learned, so that nowadays, when I say to a carpenter, here's what I want to do, I can also tell him, this is how I would do it, unless you have a better idea or a more cost-effective idea. But in the early days, I would just say, here's what I want to end up with. Now I say, here's what I want to end up with. And I think you can get a foot more height if you get in there and run an engineered beam and then re-support the walls. Wonder if we could get an extra foot. And, they're just like, yeah, okay, you're right.
You got to play Stan Laurel of Laurel and Hardy in a really funny movie, The All New Adventures of Laurel and Hardy and For Love, for Money. How did you prepare for that role?
Well, I just watched everything he ever did. And, well, I would say everything he ever did right up until 1940, but everything from the earliest silent shorts they did. And I'm really glad, if nothing else, it's not a great movie, but if nothing else, I'm glad to have seen his work, because some of the early shorts are they're shockingly brilliant. I had no idea, because when I was growing up in the 60s, you would see their stuff on TV, but it just didn't seem very interesting, because you have to really watch, and the silences and the pace and everything. So it was great to get to know his work better. Kind of a silly movie.
I thought your portrayal was amazing. Well, thank you for all the great performances over the years, all the entertainment you've given us, Bronson, and thanks for taking the time to appear on our show.
Okay.
Our guest has been the mega talented actor, Bronson Pinchot. My name's Harvey Brownstone. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time. Thank you to my producers, Steve Silver, my managers, Rick Marcelli and Robin Bragg Marcelli of the Marcelli Company in Hollywood, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my editor, Isaiah Sharalampidis, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.